Hi, I'm Joe Flick with the State Library, and I'm here with Tracy Cook, who's going to introduce our presenter this morning, or I should say this afternoon. Tracy? I have to unmute you. Yes, excuse me, just a moment. Let me fix that. My mistake. There you go. Try now.
Much easier to talk when it's unmuted.
I apologize for that.
That's all right. So it's my pleasure to introduce John Chrastka. He's the founder and is executive director of EveryLibrary, the first super PAC for libraries. Since 2012, EveryLibrary has provided pro bono support to 72 library communities, with ballot measures and tax referendum helping win well over $255 million in stable tax funding. He is a former board president of the Berwyn, Illinois Public Library and RAILS, the Reaching Across Illinois Library System. Prior to EveryLibrary, he was a partner in Associate Direct, an association consultancy, and was director for membership development at ALA. He is a 2014 LJ mover and shaker, and he tweets at EveryLibrary. So John, I'll turn it over to you.
Tracy, thanks so much. Joe, thank you too. It's nice to be here for the third and final installment for the 2017-2018 EveryLibrary series with the Montana Library Association. And I truly appreciate the logistical support that our colleagues at the Montana State Library have provided. The title for this webinar is intended to be a bit provocative, and it is intended to be a bit of a challenge. And I'm very happy to be in a position to help encourage you as library staff and your boards to eventually think about new ways to bring revenue in. The revenue picture for Montana libraries is local, it's state, and it's federal. If any of you have been paying attention to the news, you know that the president has again suggested in his 2019 budget to zero out federal funding for the Institute of Museum and Library Services, the only dedicated source of funding for libraries. Yeah, I don't know how that's going to go. And we're working very hard alongside other organizations in the library advocacy ecosystem to come against that suggested cut. State funding in Montana, like it is in my home state of Illinois, is a bit uneven right now for libraries, and state aid to libraries and the state library is certainly in need of some additional support in the next biennium. If our biggest place for funding, though, for our public libraries, whether we're a free public library, a city-county public library, a district library, any other kind of permutation of library in Montana library land, the majority of our funding comes from the local zip code, the local taxing district, your city, your county municipal partners. Let's talk about how that process can get done, not just with levy increases from a city-county government, but going out to the voters. EveryLibrary, as Tracy said at the beginning, is set up as a political action committee for libraries. We are not like any other organization nationally in the library advocacy ecosystem. We're set up to help library communities when they're on the ballot, when they've got to go to a city or county government or a town board for a negotiation around their taxes. And we are uniquely positioned not only to help the board and the staff with the informational campaign, but also to help the Vote Yes activity, to help the lobbying activity, the constituents of the library to stand up and speak out and push for fixes, if you will, to the library's funding formula. We do a lot of work around the country, and we've done a lot of work in the Montana library communities as well. We were very proud to work with both Darby and Renan. We were very proud to help Missoula early in their process. We're available to you as you're thinking through ways to move a funding conversation forward in your community. Not everything has to be a path to the ballot, but this conversation today is intended to work on, well, let's think through how do we potentially go to the ballot. I'm not shoving you from behind. If you decide to do this, I'd like to be able to work with you in a way that, well, will help support success in that ballot question. I don't want to see you rush. I don't want to see you stumble on the path to the ballot. And yet, for this conversation today, what's on your mind? Why did you come? Why did you look at this archive? What's the big questions? Well, I've got two big questions for you today. It isn't the title of the presentation. Why haven't you done it? But the two big questions I have for you today, as you're starting to think about modes of bringing in new revenue, new funding for your library, what do you want your library to achieve that you can't right now because of your current funding levels? What do you really want to do that's going to take more than just indexing to a cost of living increase? What do you really want to do that's going to take more funding? Well, to build true capacity, not just keep you at status quo. How are your vision, values, and mission not being fully expressed because of your funding shortfalls? We all have, and any of you who attended the Library as Cause program that we did back in the fall, or anyone who came to the Librarian as Candidate one that we did earlier this year, knows that the strategic plan, the building plan, the facilities plan, your management plan is all truly part and parcel of what a candidate needs and what a candidate does when they write their book. When they bring that book that they have, It Takes a Village, when they bring Dreams from My Father, when they bring Make America Great Again out, it is to talk through what is our hope, our vision, and our values. How is your funding holding you back? Well, let's talk through ways that you could potentially do it as a free public library, as a city county library, as a district library, as a library that might think about even going to become a district. My disclaimer at the start of all this, though, forgive me, is that we are not your lawyer, nor is the Montana Library Association your lawyer. The Montana State Library is not sponsoring this webinar. They're facilitating it. We are not offering legal or financial advice. All right? And the first step on the path to the ballot is you will need a lawyer. If you're looking to go out to the ballot ever, you will need a lawyer. In order to do the prosaic things of setting up the ballot language according to Montana combined statutes, Montana state statutes, the prosaic stuff about financial professionals, how much is the cost of a mill? What does it really take to fund this thing? And I would suggest that we want to start with our colleagues at the State Library, Tracy and her team over there, to help put us on this path. Everything I know about Montana libraries, I have to thank Tracy Cook and her team, and also the folks at the Montana Association of Counties for helping to inform this. Everything I know comes from experience in towns like Darby and in places like Ronan. It comes also from the information that she provided at the State Library. All right, let's do a little bit of civics 101. How do public libraries, free public libraries, get funded in Montana? I just want to do some civics with you because it'll help you. Okay, right now, many of you, well, all of you potentially on this call, but many of you have your city or city county taxes for the library established by a governing body of your city or your county, city council, county government, that they have established a public library levy that may be levied in the same manner and at the same time as other taxes. Okay, getting past the legalese of the MCA citation, it's all there for you to take a look at. It means that the city, the county, the city or the county, the city and the county set the levy for the library at the same time they issue the tax bill for everything else. The approach here that I like in the law is that the other taxes are levy a tax in the amount necessary to maintain adequate public library services. Well, you all know what that looks like sometimes when they don't think adequate is what you know to be true to be adequate. It's how it's usually done, but it's only number A in the Montana combined statutes. There's a B, a C, and a D. There's a B and a C and a D that I want you to think through with me a little bit. Because an election can be called by the city or the county. 2A, the governing body of a city or county may by resolution submit the question of imposing a tax levy to a vote for the qualified electors in an election. Now there's a way that it's done provided in other parts of the statutes. But the city or county, or city and county, or whatever your JP, your joint powers authority is for your particular free public library, they can if they don't want to do it. If they don't want to set the taxes to maintain adequate public library services, if they're unwilling to do it. There's mechanisms to go directly to the voters. It's not a casual situation. This 85-day clock that starts here on B2A, you don't want to start that clock until you're ready. And we're going to talk at the end of this session about how to get ready for it. But there is a normal, legal, licit, necessary way to do it. And there's also a C here. An election petition for by local voters. I haven't run into this in Montana before, but we've run into it in other places like in New Jersey or in Illinois or in California, where there have been local voters who are friends of the library, foundation members, friends and family of people who work there, concerned citizens who know that the amount necessary to maintain an adequate public library service is not correct. And they go out for a petition. In 2B, here's an election petition by local voters. 2B, upon a petition being filed with the governing body and signed by not less than 5% of resident taxpayers of any city or county requesting an election for the purpose of imposing a mill levy, the governing body shall, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can go around your recalcitrant city and county government. And I'm not suggesting that you as the library director or you as the library trustees are feeling that your partners in your municipality are recalcitrant about your funding, but what if they are? Well, again, there's this 85-day trigger. There is a whole series of legal mechanisms that have to be done. And I would suggest that it is a pathway to petition. It's First Amendment stuff, folks. It goes all the way back to the Founding Fathers. To petition, to ask for the chance to be able to go out to the vote. And then there's the fourth one, which is the bonds, and I'll talk to that in a minute. 64% of the folks in Teton County, 64% of registered voters turned out for a special federal election on May 25th and passed a new $2 million property tax levy to help fund their joint city-county public libraries. They followed a path that was legal and appropriate for them. And they were able to have a good conversation in the community with a fair amount of planning ahead of time. We didn't have the pleasure of working with them. I wish I would have. It was a classy campaign from everything I saw. And the voters in Montana, even in a place like Teton County, are willing to have a conversation. They're willing to have a conversation about what adequate funding really truly means for the library. Sometimes adequate is status quo. Let's just keep it at good. Sometimes adequate is with an eye towards a strategic plan or a building plan or a facilities plan that needs some additional revenue, some additional funding. Bonds are the most boring thing in the world, right? If you have your retirement plan, if you have your 401k, if you have anything, bonds are supposed to be the most stable things ever, and they truly are in the municipal debt market. They're an attractive kind of debt to float if you're a municipality, a city, or a county, because of the benefits in the bond market, and libraries are able to do it as well. Libraries are able to do it as well. Bonds may be issued by the governing body in a manner prescribed by law. Wow. Okay. How often do we go out with bonds in mind? And there are election provisions for this as well. It's fairly deep into the code, but you can float a bond. Yes, the governing body may, in a manner prescribed by law, do it. How do you bring in new revenue for building, altering, repairing, furnishing, equipping a public library, or purchasing land, for doing some big capital acquisitions like bookmobiles? And then the third one, of course, funding a judgment against the library. My apologies if you've ever been sued, but potentially you need this financial mechanism to do it. How do you do it? Well, there's a debt limit for your county. There is a fairly detailed description here for the Montana combined statutes that I've got in total for you here. But fundamentally, it is within the law for you, through your county or your city, or potentially as a independent library district, to issue debt, to do the big idea, to do the real big idea, to start from, well, your last building was from the Eisenhower administration, the Reagan administration, the Wilson administration. Perhaps it's time for a 21st century building there. How do you get on the ballot? Well, the Board of Commissioners can call for a bond election if you're in a county structure. If you have a city-county hybrid, the commissioners are still the ones who've got to issue it because it's under a county debt obligation limit, a county indebtedness limit, and there is a petition process. If you have a recalcitrant city, county government, if you have a group of folks who don't want to see you invest in 21st century facilities or 21st century technologies like a bookmobile, it is possible to go out and get a petition going where you will get signatures of 20% of your registered voters to initiate this great new idea for your library. The rules on it are fairly specific. I'm not suggesting that you go out and do this tomorrow, but I am suggesting that you could think through a process potentially where if you've been stuck, how do you get it unstuck? We see situations like this around the country all the time when there's a legislature in some state that doesn't want to pass something like minimum wage, that doesn't want to pass something like medical marijuana. You see folks initiating a petition process to go to the voters directly, and it wakes up the state legislature. And then they go ahead and do the work that they're supposed to do. We've seen this process in libraries, where the city council or county government or town board of selectmen are sitting on their hands. A petition process, you have to be brave, and it does break the status quo, and it potentially can move you forward. And if they don't want to do it, the city council or county government, and you know from your strategic plan, your building plan, the approach that you need to take is to issue some debt in order to make good on your promise, your hoped for outcomes, your vision, value, and mission. It's legal. It's possible in the state of Montana to do this. There's a whole complex election situation that's laid out in the law. There's percentages, there's thresholds, etc. Like I said at the beginning, the first thing you got to do is call a lawyer. The second thing you got to do is call a financial advisor. The third thing you got to do is call the state library. And the fourth thing you got to do is give me a shout here at EveryLibrary. Because I don't want you to move down this pathway without knowing all of the rules. We have had situations around the country where the library has moved down the calendar, messed something up in how the petition was filed, messed something up in how the ballot language was filed, found out that it was impossible and illegal for them to actually go to the ballot. I can tell you those stories privately as cautionary tales. Happy to help. Okay, what's the other thing that can get done besides issuing debt and going out for either petition initiated or city council, county government initiated new levies? It does exist in Montana to create your own library district. I don't know anything about anybody there right now who's on this webinar live or who's watching this. I'm not suggesting this is right for you, but I want to outline what's available to you. There's a process for making a district library. It's in the law. These two citations, 22-1-702 and -703. There is the chance to create or enlarge an existing district. If you've got to annex some territory in order to best serve your public, your neighbors, if you've got to put one together from scratch, there is a way to do it within the law. And it is as big of a lift of a conversation with your neighbors, with the voters, with the electors, as they say here in Montana state law, as it is for you to talk about debt and issuing bonds, as it is for you to talk to your neighbors about raising their tax rate. None of these are easier than the other. All of them are potentially an appropriate way to pursue the adequate level of funding, the adequate level of library services that you've identified. We've helped in a couple of these cases. The chance to be able to go out and have that new, robust discussion. Now, if you've got questions about everything that I've hit, I'd like you to put them in the chat box. Joe, can you jump in on me if there are questions? Because this is not a deep dive. This is not a lawyer level. And at the same time, I want to give you those waypoints.
And we don't have any questions yet, so I will certainly wait for you to take a breath, John, and get in there with questions as they come in. So folks, yeah, if you just put your questions or comments or thoughts into the chat box, and we'll share those with John, and nothing will get left behind.
No, ma'am. You've had some time to look at this on the screen. Like I said, it's detailed, but it's possible.
Let me just jump in here. If you're having trouble reading the material on the screen, you can expand the size that displays on your screen by grabbing the corner of that viewing screen for Go to Training and just dragging it away.
Thank you. Okay, well, there's always a who pays question, and it is basically the library, either through, if you're a free public library, through the county and the city, tacking it on as a question in a regularly scheduled primary or general election. That's important to note because unless you are declaring a special election, then the surcharges, if you will, are added on to the regular elections. If it's a primary, if it's a congressional primary, if it's a state regularly scheduled state municipal off-cycle election, if it's a gubernatorial, if it's a presidential, yes, the library or its governing body, meaning the city of the county, the city or the county, the city and the county, somebody's got to pay. But unless you're declaring a special election, then you are able to do it in a way that's relatively low cost. The barrier here should not be the cost of the election. It is permissible and allowable. It is permissible and allowable. All of these different models that I've addressed here, I want to help you think through a little bit about why then haven't we gone out before? What are the barriers? While it's permissible and allowable, what are the barriers? I want to take you through briefly what voters believe about libraries in order to give you a little bit of a frame, and then take you through the 7 big areas that are objections, that are sources of opposition to libraries that we've seen around the country. I want to help you inventory this a little bit so that if any of these are like, huh, I didn't know we could, or huh, I hadn't thought about that, or huh, he's right, we've been putting this off for too long.
And let me jump in here, just a note from Jenny, our state librarian. The state library collects information about levies in the public library statistics. So if you're curious about how other libraries are funded, you can always check in with us, and we'll be happy to share that information as well.
Absolutely. Around the country, in small towns and big cities, in red counties and blue towns, the attitudes around libraries sort out around 37 to 40% of your voters are definitely going to be yes voters for the library. There are people who believe in their heart, their head, or their gut that the library should be funded and the librarians should have the resources you need to do your jobs right. That the idea of the adequate public library services, they love it. Please tell me what you guys need. We will help you take care of it. 37 to 40% is way below 50% that you need, plus 1, to win an election. The remaining people that you need to win an election are in that 37 to 40% who probably would vote yes for the library, provided that you could answer their questions. That you could answer their questions about where the money's going to go and who is spending the money. Those are legitimate questions that they have. These folks are not necessarily power users of the library. They're not necessarily believers in the library. If they were, they would say yes to you automatically. But they care. They care about their town, their county. They care about those kids, those seniors, those people looking for work. They want a thriving, vital, and interesting place that is prosperous to live in. And they're willing to talk about taxes. Your job, if you were to go out for any sort of an election, in fact, your job, even if you're just negotiating with your city council or your county government, is to talk about, well, not just to the believers, you see them all the time, but to talk about those questions, to talk to those questioners who want to know where the leverage comes in from that adequate amount of funding for this adequate kind of library services. 26% of your voters are never going to vote for you. My apologies. They don't believe in taxes. That's just true. And on 364 days of the year, you can talk to them as your patrons. They probably are, some of them, your patrons, those any tax is a bad tax folks. But when it comes to election day, we really need to back up in the timeline and take as much time as we possibly have to be as transparent as possible to talk to those folks who are saying that any tax is a bad tax, not to convert them. They will never become people who believe in a progressive tax policy that funds the common good. The other 75% of folks believe in a progressive tax policy that funds the common good. These folks in the any tax is a bad tax mode, the best we can hope for is to ask them to sit this conversation out. Sit it out, because the smallest amount of tax for the library, a small amount of revenue for the library, a small amount of new funding from our tax base for the library goes to affect so many ages and stages. Perhaps we're a little bit different than any tax. Perhaps the library tax could actually be something that they could either, well, support or ignore in the nicest way possible. A couple other data points about library believers. And if you've seen our other sessions, you've done some deeper dives into this, but I want to remind you, those of you who've seen it, those of you who haven't, library use doesn't matter when you're talking about money. Library use does not matter when you're talking about taxes. You could have somebody in there every day who doesn't believe in taxation, who's a member of the Tea Party, who doesn't. You have somebody who's never come into the library and they will cut you a check every year when you send them your annual appeal because they believe. The folks, the user status doesn't matter. So if we're going to be talking about what's in it for you, if you're going to go out for new taxes, what's in it for you doesn't actually resonate with these people because there's nothing in it for them if they haven't come into the library in a long time, or they're not a power user themselves. It's what's in it for those other people. What's in it for our community? What's in it for those kids, those seniors, those people looking for work? What's in it? The conversation has to be radically different than recruiting somebody to use the library as well, because they're not going to change their user habits. The library is seen as not a provider of the practical by people who are willing to tax themselves to fund libraries. It's seen as a transformational force. How do you talk about your values, vision, and mission in a way that demonstrates with integrity that you believe, you know to be true as the library leadership team, that additional funding is necessary to continue that transformational mission? You have a vision for transformational work in the community. Your value system is aligned around transformation, both of individual lives as well as the community's well-being. Folks are willing to listen to that. It's not transactional. More books doesn't necessarily mean anything to people any more than more hours does, or more collections, or more. No, what do we believe? What do we have in our expertise as librarians? What can we project as being our hope? Hope for those people. Hope for outcomes, hope for transformation. Those are not empty promises. If it's funded on election day, we will put it to work. The other big thing here amongst voters, as opposed to amongst donors and amongst, they want to see not just the library as an institution, but the librarians also. They want answers to their two questions. The believers want to get updated on what's the library doing these days. I haven't been in a long time. I love you guys. Tell me about being a librarian today in the 21st century in our town. The questioners need to get, well, they need to get their questions answered about two things, the library and the librarians. They need to get their questions answered about where's their money going, your strategic plan, your building plan, your plan of service, your facilities plan, your collection plan, your management plan. Where's my money going? And then they also want to know who is spending their money, which is, tell me about the people who work there. And when I say librarians here, I don't mean people with degrees only. I mean everybody who works there. And the board of the library who represents their candidate. In fact, that's, okay, if a voter's willingness to support increased library funding is not driven by or limited by their use, and they want to know where their money's going, and they want to know who is spending their money, well, we've got other coaching and training for you that we've done earlier with the Montana Library Association and facilitated by the Montana State Library. Thank you. The librarian is candidate, the library as cause. The metaphor here being the library is incumbent in the race, meaning that, well, what have you done for me lately? The incumbent says, re-elect me, I will continue to take care of you, which when you go out for funding from the library is basically like new money extends our success. Or the person who's running against the incumbent says, elect me, get rid of that guy, I'll take care of you. And for a library community to take an honest look at, well, new money fixes problems, is to run either as or against yourself, to run as the incumbent or against yourself. And when you go out for a vote, you have to be really clear about what you need to get done. One or the other could be completely valid for you. If you've got to go out for a vote for the first time in a million years in order to increase your levy rate or issue a bond or maybe set up a district because stuff's a little broken, that we haven't gotten, that we're stuck, that we haven't done the necessary work, well, new money fixes problems is something that voters can listen to. Who's spending my money? Let me tell you about the librarians who are doing the good work. And if it's a new money extends our success, the new money increases our ability to do things right. We've got to go out to the vote to do it because otherwise we're stuck. Well, voters are willing to listen to that too. It's just being honest with them about it. Okay, so let's boil this all down to sugar. What makes it hard to go out? What makes it hard to think through talking to voters? What makes it difficult? There are 7 objections that we have seen over the years. We've done 75 election days. I've got another 20 on the ballot this year. We're working in places like New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. We're on the ballot coming up in Ferguson, Missouri. We've done some campaigns where the communities are having a rough time of it, and we've done some places where the community's got a lot of new opportunities to embrace. And these 7 different reasons pop up mercifully, not all 7 of them in one place, but I want to take you through it. And I want to take you through it because to get past these 7 reasons that libraries lose is either by evaluating them and they're a straw man and you don't have this problem in your place, or that yes, you do have this problem. We need to plan ahead. Give me a year or 2 or 3 years before you'd want to go start that 85-day clock, that countdown to election day. Number 1, if you don't do marketing, you're never going to get past the problem of the uninformed voter. If you don't do marketing about what's on the ballot, and you're supposed to, it's your job as the library, you have to talk about both Plan A and Plan B. It might be a basic plan, it might be an aspirational plan, but the community needs the library to do something. Plan A is the official plan for the library if the voters say yes on election day. What happens if it passes? We're going to do X and Y and Z with this new money. It's going to extend our success, or it's going to fix our problems. But it's not just Plan A that's on the ballot. Plan B is on the ballot as well. If Plan A identifies your expected and hoped for outcomes, your expected and hoped for outcomes with new money, Plan B defines what it looks like to keep managing the library inadequately, because why else would you go to the ballot? If it was adequate, you'd be cool. Keep running the library inadequately with Plan B, you've got that responsibility to tell the voters about it. We at EveryLibrary can help you think that through. We at EveryLibrary don't want to do that quickly, because if you're building a strategic plan, if you're setting up a facilities plan, if you've got some big changes that are going to need you to go to the vote, well, your responsibility, of course, is to develop those 2 plans. What's going to happen if it passes? What's going to happen if it fails? And we can help you think that through. Part of helping you think it through, if I can, is that we got to fix the way we do planning. Planning oftentimes has a focus group approach. And one of the great barriers is that we have a self-referential focus group environment sometimes. And we have self-fulfilling prophecies in our planning. And we discover that the insiders, the people who love us, who show up to focus groups and to take our survey monkeys, or to be our reactor panels, don't necessarily represent the community at large. And that we sometimes break down in library land where we discover too late. We're 6 months out, we're 3 months out, we're already in the 85-day window. That what we wanted to do wasn't actually resonant. Well, the way that we build it differently in the planning process is to actually focus on building a coalition for the library before we start talking about how much money it is that would be in the bond or on that levy. To build a coalition for the library before we even start thinking through the mechanics of going out for a district, there are folks in your community who stand in common cause with you already on issues that matter, like economic development and individual prosperity, on pre-K school readiness, on livability. Those folks want to be part of a coalition for the library with you, and I've got advice in other presentations that we've done about how to do it. There are folks who have a common concern for a population like those seniors, those people looking for work, those kids after school, those kids during the summer. We can fix the planning process and know with a great deal of more certainty about how much to ask for at the levy election if we do it in a consultative way, a truly consultative way, where the consultation isn't just among the insiders, but is among the broader circles. And those broader circles are not just contributing to you developing your strategic plan or your building plan, but are complicit in its eventual success. They will help carry you all the way to election day. Those are the first 2 to remind us what our 7 reasons are. Local elected officials and the zero-sum people who work against the library ballot measure, big problem. I'm going to dive into that in a second. That there are anti-tax groups that are organized and campaign against the library. I'm going to dive into that in a moment. And that there are people who are against the library board or staff personally. It's a hard one to hear, but I'm going to dive into that in a moment too. Who else cares is a way to get beyond the question of a local elected and zero-sum people who work against the library ballot measure. Who else cares? When local elected officials come out against it, especially if you're going to do an end run around them, there's some real problems. We need to make it bigger than just the local electeds and the folks who are in power. We have to make it bigger than those people who are looking at scarce resources, either as a selfish opportunity amongst the zero-sum game people, or as a fight between different groups. Who else cares is to try and build the biggest possible conversation and to write a strategic plan or a building plan that is expansive, and to not write it in isolation, as I mentioned in number 2 before. The only way you can work on this, folks, is to do the drinking coffee approach. To find out who else cares is to go out and have coffee with people. To say to them, well, the library's mission right now, the adequate funding that we're supposed to have isn't here. The adequate building that we're supposed to have isn't around our ears. You care about the same people I do. You might have some good responses from them when you go out and talk. You might have some good responses that we can help coach you through. You know, John, I like what you're doing at the library. Keep me informed. Okay, great. They've opted into having a bigger conversation with you about the future funding for the library. John, I support what you're doing at the library. How can I help? Well, that starts to really build a campaign team and a true coalition. John, I want to identify strongly with what you're doing at the library. Great, you're on the campaign committee. The anti-tax forces that are out there that sometimes make us hesitant to go out. And I don't know how red or blue your place is. It doesn't really matter to me because we've won and lost in red places and blue places. We've won and lost library measures in blue, Democrat, progressive, because they've had a breakdown. And we've helped pass measures in places like, Jasper, Indiana, and in Kent District Library outside of Grand Rapids, and a few other places that are fairly, anti-tax folks are never going to change their mind, but you have to meet with them. And you have a responsibility as a unit of government to be transparent about your taxes. And I think that you have, as a library community, the need to stand on your principles, your values, your mission, and to have a conversation with those same anti-tax folks who might not necessarily want to do taxes, the big taxes, but maybe the small taxes in this case. Maybe the small levy for the library. Maybe a reasonable amount of money for that new building. Maybe a bond that actually moves things forward. I've seen it. We've coached it. We've helped think through it together. It takes time, though. It takes 2-3 years of time. I'm not suggesting that you go out tomorrow. In fact, I wouldn't let you. This conversation is not about taxes. It's about vision, values, and hopes. And I guarantee that the people who you're sitting across the table from, while they might not necessarily agree about the mechanism, can get past the mechanism for revenue discovery because they care about the same people you do. All right. The problem, though, around when folks are against you personally, this is a barrier sometimes to going out to the voters. That we know in our heart of hearts that somebody's got a problem with me, that somebody's got a problem with us, that somebody's got a problem with my board president, that there's been some bad blood. Well, how do we get past that? Again, it's time. And not in a pithy time heals all wounds situation. Time heals, time forgets, sure. But can we work on building up a new group of people? Can we help with restoration and reconciliation? Yeah, I think we can. We might have to get you out of your own way. We might have to find somebody to endorse this campaign who's bigger than you are. Yes, that's a campaign technique. We might have to find somebody to be a proxy for you because you get in your own way. Yeah, that's possibly true. But if the barrier is emotional around why you won't go out for a vote, let's have a conversation like adults about how we harmed each other and how we can reconcile that. It works in communities. Sometimes it works because we have found the right endorser, the right proxy. Sometimes it works because we've taken 18 months, 2 years, 3 years to do that healing process across the community because it's all rooted in what our values are about the community that we're trying to serve together. There are some questions that you can ask folks to broaden your team. If you're feeling a little bit alone right now, a little isolated right now, if you've got folks coming at you and you still need to be able to talk about money in a clean way, in a smart way, these questions we can help work through with your board and your staff. We help coach you on this. The big question that I always, it's a trick question. I mean, why is the library important to you personally? To ask somebody who could be an ally, that's an interesting conversation to have. What's your favorite reason to use the library? Somebody who could be your proxy or endorser. It's nice to know. But really, question three. Question three is the trick question here. Who does the library serve? If you're sitting across the table from somebody who should be your ally, and they answer everybody, that's nice. They get a check, but to get a check plus gold star, A+ on the exam is to say some specific population, because that means that they have a somewhat deeper understanding of what the library is supposed to do, and they have a great deal of compassion for some group of people that the library is currently serving, possibly inadequately, because you don't have the funding you need. The conversation that can move forward is pretty robust. All right, there's 2 more reasons on our list of 7 reasons why libraries lose. Again, I pray that you do not have all 7 of these situations in your community. If you do, it might take longer than 18 months or even 3 years to get to the ballot. But if we can unwind some of these with you, I'd like to think that through. One dirty thing to talk about is when the board and the staff say no. Well, some of the board says no, some of the staff says no. It really comes down to inclusive planning, and it really comes down to having enough time to think it through. You don't go out on day 86 for an 85-day countdown to go to the ballot for a bond or for a levy or to set up a new district. The emergency that you have to address, unfortunately, isn't going to be solved by, well, especially if you've got dissension amongst your insiders. People look to the board, people look to the staff, people ask the board, people ask the staff, how do you feel about this? No, not officially, not what's on the FAQ, not what's on the website, but how do you feel about this? What do you think, Jerry? What do you think, Karen? So to have everybody involved at the table is to have everybody involved at the table. Yes, they can be tasked with doing coalition building. They can be assigned the responsibility of having cups of coffee, but it starts inside first. How do we want to be adequately, properly funded? Where is our personal vision, mission, and values about being people who work in or serve the library? To have that conversation isn't a snap judgment. It isn't 85 days. It's 2 years, 3 years of work. And even if things are great, even if you have the best staff and the most able board and everybody's on the ship together, great. Then let's use this time to plan on our path to the ballot to get even tighter. Let's use this time on our path to the ballot even to bring some people up who might not immediately self-identify saying, I want to have those cups of coffee with our counterparts. That don't immediately say, this is staff training, this is board development time. It could be very valuable to you. And number 7 is we've waited too long. I keep saying 85 days because that's what you have in the statutes. You have to take the time. I've got 2 other webinars for you that we've done with the Montana Library Association and hosted by the Montana State Library. I truly appreciate it. There's the video versions of it. Please go watch them. I have a book. I'm not trying to sell you on it. I am trying to mention it to you, though. Winning Elections and Influencing Politicians for Library Funding could help you think it through. But fundamentally, talking to our colleagues, Tracy and her team at the Montana State Library, and us here at EveryLibrary. I'm not pushing you forward. I'm suggesting that you've got some wind beneath your wings. The other resource to get started now is if you can take a look at what our colleagues over at the Montana Association of Counties has done. They've got some amazing resources about how the law works, how levies and bonds and districts are supposed to go. Granted, they're on the county side and they're not just on the library side. But if you need somebody else's opinion besides me and Tracy, if you need somebody else's opinion, check out what they've got. There are trip hazards on the path to the ballot as well that I want you to be able to take a look at from what they've got going, and to start an early process, even if. So I said at the beginning, we've done 75 election days. I've got about another 20 on the ballot this year in 2018 around the country. We've probably talked to 150 libraries. Yeah, at least maybe 140 libraries, where the remainder of them have said, you know what, it's not the right time for us. I'm glad we've had this conversation about going to the ballot. I'm glad we've thought through this together, but the timing isn't right or the process isn't right. Maybe we need to go out and fundraise. Maybe we need to go out for a big grant. Maybe we need to re-engage our city and county partners who are our funders for the normal way that they do it, and to find that level of adequacy together. Again, back to your big questions. I'm not asking why haven't you gone out. I've gone through some stuff that I could speculatively say, here's 7 reasons maybe you haven't. But what could your community achieve? What could your library achieve in your community if you were to fix it? Fixing it might be having your levy set by your city and your county properly. Fixing it might be going out to the voters. And how will you best express your vision, values, and mission with your new funding? These aren't rhetorical questions. I'm interested. We've got a few minutes here at the end of this to bounce off some questions about the stuff I said at the beginning, about the law, some questions, some comments, some concerns about the barriers, some thinking through how voters think in your particular place. We've got a couple minutes here, and I'd like to see if we can have a chat. As you're thinking through your questions, I do want to come back around to this idea that user status doesn't matter, though. And anything that you're going to be talking about money, about revenue, about levy, about bond, about district, that you're going to have a conversation with two types of people. I don't mean voters and non-voters. I mean users and non-users. Who are voters? The non-user and the user who are voters. To the user, I need you to start thinking through a way to talk to them with a phrase that begins, as you know. Because even if they don't know what you need, it's on you to bring them in and to have them understand they're part of the tribe and to energize them as somebody who's a stakeholder. As you know, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with the library just around the corner from the high school, and the fact that this building was built in the Eisenhower administration, we have a problem serving these kids. As you know, we are the only place in town that does serve these kids. As you know, our funding has been limited by the city and county government, by our current structure, by the fact that we haven't floated a bond for debt in a million years. As you know, we could solve this problem if we went to the voters. As you know, we need your help. Likewise, to the non-user, those folks who have not been into the library since the Eisenhower administration, potentially, you have to begin your conversation about your money, your funding needs, your levy, your district maybe, with the phrases you can imagine. Because those folks are capable of imagining what you want to get done. As you can imagine, with the high school right around the corner at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, this place fills up. As you can imagine, we're the only place in town that does X and Y and Z for these kids. As you can imagine, with the way the economy's been, we've been kind of limited in what we can do with our funding. As you can imagine, we'd like to do more. As you can imagine, we would need your help having a conversation in this community about the proper, adequate way to fund it. And as you can imagine, going to the voters is not going to be easy. But as you can imagine, if we do this together, I think we can get our mission, vision, and values, which you share, realized. All right, team, that's me. I'm here to help. We're here to support the Montana library community. Joe, I'm interested in if there's anybody who's got questions or comments. In the meantime, I invite you to take a look at what we're doing online as EveryLibrary as well. This is my commercial time. We're trying to build 1 million Americans for Libraries list. We're working hand in glove with the Montana Library Association on some projects in 2018 to help reach more members of the public about what libraries do and how library funding at state and local levels matter, and the federal funding formula as well. If you haven't already, I'd invite you to like our page at facebook.com/EveryLibrary. If you need it, give me a shout, especially on our Save School Librarians site. If you've got school librarians in your life who are facing some sort of crisis, again, here's me. Anything coming through on the chat, Joe?
Not yet, but I think we need to give people a few moments to enter into that, and I can certainly try unmuting everyone and see.
Yeah, if we want to have a conversation, that'd be fine too.
I'm keeping the recording going for now, just because I think there might be a couple of comments or questions that would be really worth getting into the recording. Certainly. So, and Tracy, Jenny, anything to add?
All right, now, Joe, I think we're kind of processing.
Cool.
John,
one of my go ahead, please.
Oh, John, this is Jenny, and I was thinking a little bit about your comments earlier about people who believe in the zero-sum game, and I just want to make sure I understand what you meant by that. I'm envisioning people who, they're less concerned about the library per se, and more concerned about keeping government the same size, not growing government, not growing the size of the budget. Is that sort of what you mean by the zero-sum game?
There are folks who are focused on it fiscally, yes. But there are also folks who look at the kind of people that I run into sometimes in my hometown. I mean, I've been here in my hometown of Berwyn, Illinois, my whole life. My grandfather came over from the old country. My dad grew up here. I'm raising my sons here. There are some of my neighbors who do not like the fact that Berwyn is changing, and that they look at the way to save Berwyn is to burn it down, you know. And I don't mean that literally. I mean that metaphorically. We will have a fight with each other sometimes over resources. We will say that it's a situation where if there's compassion at the core of what the library does for those kids, those seniors, those people looking for work, and those people are not our neighbor anymore, they're just those people, that's what I mean. That there are occasions where folks will say, what do you against today, you know, Sam? Well, what do you got? And they can short circuit a library funding measure like nobody's business.
Thanks.
Sure.
And my takeaway from that, this is Joe, was that you need to place your resources behind that 37% who aren't just going to vote yes, but can be convinced to vote yes. Trying to get everybody to vote yes is probably not your best strategy.
No, it's not a census, it's an election.
That's right, yeah. Mm-hmm. I thought it was really interesting too, when you went through that list of the issues that are going to impact whether somebody votes yes or not, and that sometimes those issues are just personal, and one of the things you do is kind of help libraries sort out when it's an individual person, maybe on the board or in the hierarchy of the library, who just needs to step back so that the issue can go forward. That's an interesting strategy.
It does happen, and it is not pleasant, of course, to be able to have to confront that. And at the same time, it's fairly adult of us to be able to say, you know what, me and this other person, me and this group, you and this person, you and that group are getting in the way of what's best for the community. Doesn't mean you have to step off of leadership. Doesn't mean you have to resign your position. It means we've got to look at this like adults.
And I have a comment in the chat box from Jeannie Ferris from Whitehall, and she says, it seems like good planning ahead of time is the key. And thank you so much for excellent information. Lots to think about. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording right now, and then we can stay on the line for a few more minutes. We still have 7 minutes to the top of the hour, 5-6 minutes, something like that, to the top of the hour. So we can certainly stay on the line if people want to have more discussion. But thank you, John. And Jenny, Tracy, anything else to add?
This is Kim. I have a question.
Oh, good.
John, you mentioned 18 months to go to ballot, and then you also mentioned 2 years, 3 years. If you're a good planner and have some things in place, are you saying that 18 months is probably the least amount of time?
That would be the shortest window, unless you're under some extreme duress. You need about 18 months you need about 18 months to make sure that your strategic plan or your building plan is truly fundable, to help make those meetings happen across your community, the wide range of different organizations and agencies and stakeholder groups, and to have time to prepare more than one round of public outreach and public communication about Plan A and Plan B. Plus, you need to be able to set up a yes committee in town that has enough resources, both money and people, to do the get out the vote, the classic neighbor, voter to voter, knock on the door, telephone call, postcard campaign. The fastest campaign we've ever run was 6 weeks. From the date that it was put on the ballot. This was in Spokane, Washington. The city council put it on the ballot December 28th. It was on the ballot February 6th. I don't want to do that ever again.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And
Jody,
one
I
more,
appreciate you commenting on
yeah,
the chat about appreciating and enjoying the webinars. That's really nice of you. Thank you. And it's been a pleasure to work with this team here at the Montana State Library, as well as with the team at the Montana Library Association. I'm all in on being able to participate in another campaign, whether it's Darby or Renan sized, or whether it's one of the bigger towns, whatever is appropriate. I'd love to be able to chat.
and with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording.